One of the things that when I'm in the business world, a lot of people talk about strategy and they think it's fluffy or they don't know how to apply it and how to make it real. So we at IBM have a technique called component business modeling, which really helps model the company on a page and uses views to help you get practical insights on how to apply strategy and the different variables that your business is facing against the business architecture. So we'll start off tonight talking about business architecture and modeling. Then I'll dive down deep into what we call component business modeling. I'll talk about a client where I actually applied this. I've done it to dozens of clients, but I picked out a use case that I think is fun. And I'll finish up with 5 views that I think you need to think about from technology that really will change how you think about strategy for your businesses. So there's a lot of different business architectures out there. A recent report by Forrester said a lot of them lack both breadth and depth. So there's a lot of frameworks that are really good at taking one view of something. But we live in a multi-view kind of world. We live in a world where it's not possible to maximize on one variable. So a lot of the models that will give you a very good one-dimensional answer when you apply it in a multilinear regression don't really give you the answer you need from multiple different breaths. And they also aren't intuitive to the clients and your sponsors that you have to communicate to. So, I mean, you have this TOGAF architectures, you have your BRM from the U.S. government, which a lot of you are familiar with, you have MIT's, business reference architecture, you have Canadians, you have BMM, you have BWAD, you have lots of different methods out there. So how we view business architecture in IBM research is it's the approach to formalize the way an organization operates based upon convergence among strategy, your business process management, and information technology. And if you guys want to go to the Institute for Business Value, which you can find on IBM.com, you can find our actionable business architecture approach to the topic. And the Institute for Business Value is a wonderful source of reference material that I highly recommend that you visit sometime. There's dozens of articles about current business topics over 22 different industries. When you think about what it means to modify or transform your organization, you have to think about how are you internally specialized. We have 3 stages of what we call internal specialization. One is business unit optimized, and you see a lot of companies that are just silos. They run independent businesses. General Electric was one of these businesses that was really siloed, business unit optimized. The next step you see, they try to do shared services. You get process optimization where you pull some things into process centers and it serves the lines of business. And then you get enterprise optimized where key activities are centralized, but you have duplication of activities is minimized. To make the optimization practical, firms need to embrace a structured design for business services. And to do that, whether it's a line of business service or a shared service, you need to have a module that contains similar activities supported by appropriate assets. A component serves a unique purpose and would in principle act as an independent entity. And so when you think about today's business architecture and the things that are going on with cloud and the things that are going on with the ability to bring internal partners in to do specific processes or consume APIs or microservices, this is the same thing as a business component, and the ability to specialize your enterprise via these new techniques is really actually practically applied now. So on the other axis, you need to think about how are you doing external specialization. In phase 1, you're basically internally integrated. So you are integrated among yourselves. Phase 2, you do some incremental, maybe across all 3 different areas or some incremental strategic partnering. Phase 3, you're really industry network. So if you think about someone like a lot of the retailers, if you look at LL Bean, for example, they don't do fulfillment. They give a third-party FedEx or they give FedEx or they give United Parcel Service. They do fulfillment. They bring the truck up to the shipping center, or Google does, and a third party does it. So whole areas of the business are actually networked with other partners. And so what this matters is because when you actually can take the internal specialization and the internal specialization, the external specialization, and combine them, you can start to see a spectrum to where most companies are. Some people take the high road where they really look at internal specialization, and they think competitive advantage can be driven by internal specialization, and they don't want to partner a lot. Some companies need a lot of external specialization, and they want to be good at just a couple things. For example, British Petroleum wants to be good at drilling and marketing. Everything else they'll rely on partners for. Most enterprises are kind of stuck in the messy middle here between external and internal specialization. And the ultimate goal for your organization is figure out where on this frontier between working with partners, consuming new types of goods and services via the cloud, or going inside, where can you get competitive advantage, and where can you actually succeed in the marketplace at the right level of risk and cost. So again, when we pull it all together, that's what we call the specialized enterprise. Components are individual business models. Each component contains people, activities, and supporting technologies. When you look at enterprise performance, when you isolate it this way, you can look at performance. You can if you need to pull things out or put things in, you have boundaries, and you have areas of business process that are easily decoupled. They collaborate and integrate seamlessly with each other, and each component plays a significant or subordinate role in differentiating the company's strategy. And again, when you have this kind of understanding of what the business capabilities are, you can then project the strategy against it, and then you can start to do some very interesting things with strategy. All right, component business model thinking. A map and what you see in a map really depends upon your point of view and what you're trying to look for, and also what you want to get out of the map. So that was New York, but New York can be represented by several different abstractions. You have the subway system, you have the neighborhoods, you have the zip codes for New York. Again, it's an abstraction of a reality from a specific view, and we want to do modeling and mapping so that we can understand the business and build a little, and be able to understand and project different scenarios of uncertainty to help us map and really look at the alternatives for improving the business for your organization. Similar to views of Manhattan, company can be viewed by many different perspectives. You have your IT application view, the hairball, you have functional views, you have process views, and you have competence views. A CBM map is really about the competence views. So besides being technical or process flow, what you really want to look at a model is say, what questions do you want it to answer? Are strategies optimally aligned? What do we need to be able to be a truly globally integrated enterprise? How do we become more focused and competitive as a company? What are the key competencies to secure our success? Are our resources aligned optimally with our strategies? These are all the types of things you could build a business architecture to ask questions about. And the way you answer that is to get the data and apply it against your business architecture model to help you, bring the answers to life and to understand the complexities and the interactions between them. So when we do a business component map, it's actually fairly simple. It's got 3 different operational levels. We could have made it 6, but we really don't. We think there's 3 basic operational levels. There's directing, there's controlling, and there's executing. Some people call it strategic, management, and operations. I don't care. I really care about what the client and their language. And it's a series of competencies. So these columns are business competencies that if you go left to right, they tend to have kind of like a Porter's value chain effect. They're MECE, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. And within them are business components that usually reside just within one of these areas of accountability. So with this technique, I can actually look at the big business competencies that are within a business. I can create components that are related to the operational the area of accountability. And on one page, I can create a business model for any business. And in our library of processes, we have over 450 maps right now for different types of business, different variants of business. It's really a very flexible technique that you can use to apply and think about and actually get people to talk about what the challenges are in a very simple way, without simple and elegant way, without having to do too much over-analysis, although you can do over-analysis. So what's in a business component? So a business component has a couple of things. It has a business purpose. Okay, so what is the business purpose? What is the benefit of it? And when I work with clients and you go to each of the components and you actually get them to create 2 sentences that have a business purpose, it actually is a really beneficial activity, because many of them have not done that. There's a series of activities that the component has. It has resources it consumes. It has applications and infrastructure it consumes. And then how is it governed? How many different ways is it governed? And then what business services in and out, what business service does it consume from other components, and what services does it provide? So if you think about a component, if you're familiar with object-oriented analysis and technology, OOAD, a business component is very similar to OOAD. So I'm often asked, what's the difference between a component view and a process view? Well, a component view focuses on what the enterprise is doing, not how it's being done. Processes and activities are focused more on the how. As a result, components are more directly enabling the strategy than processes. So it's easier to take a business capability and project different views about performance, strategy, cost, people, than it is to put it against a process. But processes are very helpful. So a component view and a process view are different but complementary. And at the activity level that I just showed you, the activities and the activities are roughly the same thing. So let's take a really quick example of what an interaction map might look like for a component. So here's the component rentals and reservations, which is part of a business process that you can see on the lower right-hand corner. You reserve a vehicle, you check out a vehicle, you check in a vehicle. Well, rentals and reservations needs to go to the check-in vehicle. It needs to go to the checkout vehicle component. It needs to look for location information. It needs to do customer profiles. It needs to go to the check rates activity. So again, it does a certain amount of things. It has methods and properties that are well known and expressed, and it consumes information from other objects or components and gives information to other products and components. So by changing the evaluation criteria, the CBM framework helps participants respond to a number of big business issues. So this is an example from a consumer product goods company. What you would do is take the strategy of a company. We want to do this. We want to expand. We want to serve these customers. You actually go and get their business strategy document. And then you apply it against these competencies and components and say, well, what's really strategically differentiating? What's competitive parity, and what's basic? And what you'll find a lot of times is, there should be not a lot that are really strategically differentiating. If there's a lot, you have to work harder. But what you'll find is there's a lot of important things, and those important things are basic. So everyone has a role to play. And actually, when you work with clients sometimes, and their jobs are in basic components, so they don't think, they're basically telling them that you're not important. There's a lot of change management that can be very tricky when you do this. And so you can combine that with a financial view. And so this is a common view that we get. We count all the money, and we attribute the money to each component. So you have areas that are high capital area, high cost areas, high cost and capital areas. Maybe I want to pay attention to this. But if you'll notice from the differentiation view, these aren't necessarily the same ones. And reconciling that is sometimes an interesting exercise. And so from this analysis, we say, well, for our immediate priority, these are the things we need to do. And for this company, it was some very execution-oriented things. Although supply chain and distribution was important, it wasn't as important as changing these very tactical things in the execution area of accountability. So again, here's how you can take a very easy analysis and be able to project it through to get insights of how your strategy applies against your operating model. But what this basically shows is for an original equipment manufacturer, the differentiating core base components. So for this OEM, their innovation strategy, their portfolio strategy, their sales strategy, their production strategy, these were all critical differentiating business components. Again, you would think, oh, well, I think production is differentiating, but for them, being ahead of the curve and really understanding their sales and the products that they're going to plan to, they can build them. Like making sure they don't lose that competitive advantage at the strategy level is really more important. So again, here's the same model, same customer, OEM manufacturer with the business criticality. So again, the stuff they need to do with excellence is really, a lot of it's down on the bottom. They need to be excellent in their operations of how they warehouse, how they build, how they do customer service, how they do sales handling. This is the stuff that's critical to the business, okay? But it's not differentiating. So again, you can have different views on a map. And, if you're someone who cares about, the criticality part, you're going to think my part of the world is really important down here. But when you really think about it from a differentiation of the strategy perspective, other things are more important. So you can get some very quick and interesting insights by using techniques like this. So here's some lenses that we typically use. Lenses are just questions you would ask against the map. What are the most critical differentiators from a customer point of view? How are our capabilities aligned to our strategic priorities? Are there capabilities we need, moving forward that we don't have? What are the commonalities across the company? So a lot of times you look at for duplication. What are the commonalities we want to have across the company? How should we design our business model, for each component? Because there might be different governance models, there might be different fulfillment models, there might be different financial models, there might be different partner models you want for the different competencies and capabilities of your business. In addition, you could take, you're really only limited from like component attribution perspective by the questions you want to ask. I usually don't want to do more than 5 attributions, which are views per map. But you could look at, for any component, you could look at the level of technology leverage, the capital utilization, is it suited for the organization? Is it core to the strategy? Is it centralized versus decentralized? Is there product and service differentiation? You could do cost, you could do people, but those are some basic ones. If you could take some basic ones and then combine them with some very specific questions that you want to ask against the model, then you can actually provide some pretty cool insights that, help the customer get to the different state that they want to get to, understand the shortfalls, and create a migration plan to get there. Again, you're only limited by your imagination. So this originally started for business model innovation, but you can take it and find views against business strategy. You can do technology strategy. We have models we've created for CBMs for IT. You can look at, your business model and see, is my IT strategy and governance, are my applications there? Do I have overlapping IT systems? You can say which parts of my business are being served by an ERP or too many ERPs. You can look at your operation strategy, and you can look at your transformation agenda. Again, what you want, the map is just a map, just like the map of New York. You can make it say different things depending upon what information you show against the map, and that's what these views are. So this is an example of a commonality map. So a lot of companies face the question of what do I want centralized, what do I want decentralized, where do I want these? This is an example of this company. If you look at it, it's kind of hard to see the black ones, but the black ones are the ones that they decided they want centralized. Then there was the next levels, and you can see that what we were able to do is to go to the company and say, look, here's the level of decentralization, standardization we want for you to have as a company. For management, it helped build consensus. For the program manager, he understood the insights of the sequences of the change. The training team understood the magnitude of the change. The process team understood, which processes were going to have to be global and which would be regional. And for the worker, they understood how the company relates to him or her. So let's go and make it real and look at a client use case. All right, so this was a project in South America. It was all of the countries of South America. I worked with a CPG company, and the reason the reason we did this project is they had very ambitious growth targets in this region. So they were expecting over the next 5 years to double revenues. They needed to increase profit margins by 5 points, aggressively enter new and unfamiliar markets. They're going to implement SAP, go to shared service, and develop a bunch of big things and execute against the new matrix business model. This is a lot to do, and they were trying to grow the top line, which is the harder challenge than shrinking costs. Growing the top line really means you have to change your business model. It means you have to change how you're doing things, how you're working things. So, we needed to test the capability of their go-to-market and supply chain systems built for salty and tasty snacks, to get this kind of growth. And we had to, there was no way they were going to get that kind of growth in revenue and profit and enter different markets with the leaky pipes that they had. They really needed to put some new pipes in the infrastructure to support this growth. So I usually don't show project slides, but the thing that's really important when you're doing something like this is there's two paths that you really need to think about, and they're both equally as important. One is the amount of work you're getting done, and that's the CBM's criteria selection. But in a project like this, you have to get the data, and you have to get executive buy-in. And these are just as important as the work that you actually do, because it was a very difficult time getting this type of comprehensive data, and you'll see the types of views that we developed. We had to get the SAP views, the HR views, the Center of Excellence surveys, go talk to all the executives, build the buy-in, so they understood this consulting approach. So, the work that you do is just as important as the data and the interviews that you get, and combining them in one recommendation, is easier said than done. So two primary strategies for growth were identified. One is multi-category. So they had 3 or 4 categories, but salty and tasty snacks really were the majority, 50% of the sales. They wanted to go to a model where they got into health foods, drinks, non-salty and tasty, Quaker, that kind of stuff. The multi-category, they wanted to go to multi-category in each cluster. Low-income consumer, they wanted to expand into the low-income consumer market, but they didn't just want to expand salty and tasty into low-income consumer, which is fatty and salty. So, they wanted to be able to address this market space for growth, but with the new products that they were putting out there, more like fresh foods, milk-based snacks, water, flavored waters, things that, would be beneficial to the low-income consumer. There were 2 more strategic teams we identified. One was the product innovation. They really needed to think about product innovation. And the last thing they needed to look at was M&A. So there was no way, specifically in some of the geographies they faced, because in the CPG market, in a lot of these areas, you can really only deliver to a plant, to an area from 300 to 400 miles around the plant, given the perishability of the goods. So, entering and looking at M&A to grow these new brands, but also grow the market presence was really critical. And, we looked at the M&A view for them to say, you can't just do this all organically. So this is a view of the strategic view of this company. So again, they had 6 different competencies: consumer relationship, customer relationship, procurement and inventory, go-to-market and supply chain, manufacturing, and business administration. And you can see the strategic view. Red is very high, yellow is high, green is medium, and purple is low. And then we also did a competitive view. So we combined the strategic view map with the competitive. So differentiating competitive and basic. The good thing is that a lot of their execution areas and their management areas they were making money. And so when you usually have that situation, you usually don't have, a lot of problems in that area. But what they didn't have, was up at the strategy level where they really needed differentiating consumer insight strategy, category planning, product innovation strategy, supply chain. They had channel trend insights that were really important, and these were differentiating. So they had their strategy and they had their market survey. So you can see again how you can start to, on one page, look at what this tells you as a consultant. It's like there's a lot of work that they need to focus on the strategy area. However, they're a very operationally oriented company, so that placed some challenges, in their mindset. Maturity view. So how maturity were the components? So you can see that that customer insight planning and insight strategy, they weren't very mature there. The good thing is a lot of the execution areas, again, the execution of the management areas, they were either medium or high, and that's a good thing. Manufacturing, there was some weaknesses down there, but it wasn't jeopardizing the enterprise. The headcount view. So we went through all the geographies and counted actually everyone who worked for the company. So tens of thousands of people. And we broke them into upper quartile, lower quartile. So, do you have the people to attack this problem? And you can see up the strategy area, they really hadn't put a lot of folks into that area to really focus on this. However, they were tremendously overweighted in execution people. So there's some automation and some production optimization opportunities down there. The cost view. So we counted all the money. And again, you can see, you are, to some degree, you are the money you spend as a company. And so there at the strategy level, there were some areas that were good, but in customer strategy and planning, customer and consumer relation planning, not tremendous levels of spend there. So what you do, so we went through, and this is why there was so much data to get. This was a significant job. We took the strategic view, we took the maturity view, we took the headcount view, we took the cost data, and we used this data to create individual views. So we had, cost data for Chile, we had, headcount data for Argentina, and we had all these different views. There's a 300-page report, and we combined it into the heat map that you see below. And so what you do is you begin with a strategic view. You understand what components are strategic. You understand, are they mature? Are there a lot of people, working them? How much are you spending? And it's kind of like the old in high school, the old anatomy book where you have the body, you pull off the skin, you pull off the organs, you pull off the bones, and then you get to the, you build it up, and that's how you get your heat map, which says, look, here's the things you need to focus on essentially. And so this was the final 6 components that we said, if you want to grow this fast, if you want to increase profit, if you want to do all these great things, you want to change your product mix, you want to get it more balanced, you need to focus on these 6 components: product innovation strategy, consumer insight strategy, customer insights, supply chain manufacturing, and you need to work on M&A. Now, channel trend insights were really important. Product ideation was really important. But you can only do so much. And given the amount of resources they had and the time they had, these 6 seemed to make the most sense, and that was our recommendations. What we did was really created 3 work streams of recommendations to help them. One is manufacturing and supply chain strategy could really be put together in one work stream to really comprehensively address their manufacturing and supply chain weaknesses that would, if they wanted to drive, increase revenue that much, the supply chain is going to have to move more product, and if you can't move more product, you're not selling more product. Customer insight strategy and planning, and product innovation strategy really were highly correlated. So again, we combined the 3 of these to really into one work stream, and we had about 20 pages of recommendations about how to improve the infrastructure and the base there around understanding customers, understanding product, and getting out there with product that would be appealing in the marketplace. then we set up a work stream to help them understand how could they use, mergers and acquisitions, buying new cookies and creams in the nutrition business, really looking at, buying 10 to 15 acquisitions over the next 3 to 5 years and how to integrate them, because they were not going to be able to grow and achieve their revenue growth just organically. So that was a really exciting project. It's a great example that you can use to think about, how you practically apply, looking at your business architecture of your agency or your company, and then applying the strategy against it, and get 1 to 2 variables and put it against that, and then have a conversation with people. And that's the real benefit of, practically applying strategy to operational thinking. So I want to take a couple minutes here as we're about to finish up. And I want you to think 5 views that you need to think about where the puck is going. And this is I've been in my career. I started off in strategy and transformation. I was tech strategy. Now I'm in the cloud, and I'm really applying a lot of these business strategy concepts to, changing the business model of our clients around, how technologies change things. So I want to talk to you about these 5 things that some are obvious, some are maybe a little cutting edge, but they all tied together. These will change the strategies that your agencies or your companies are dealing with. One is artificial intelligence. For example, we have Watson listening to calls in a call center to learn the business of the call center. And it learns, what makes calls good, how many minutes are spent on calls, how does voice and intonation affect the calls. Artificial intelligence, which is learning from data and applying the lessons and learning from data, is rapidly becoming, is rapidly coming into the enterprise, and it's really practically being applied. If you go to IBM.com, there's 29 APIs for different Watson services. Watson Learning, Watson Tone. You can consume that API for free. You write something and it'll tell you about the tone of your writing. Blockchain. Blockchain is going to be really big. In New York City, they have a huge problem with deeds. The deeds for houses. That's why you have to have property mortgage insurance. So if you think about anything that requires trust and authentication, it's not about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is an application of distributed ledger. But blockchain, which is a distributed ledger, can be used for deeds, can be used for food safety, can be used for cargo management, anything that requires trust and authentication. But it needs to be worth it. For example, at Walmart, they are using it for food safety for the entire food chain. However, they don't use blockchain to track toilet paper. So it's a very heavy technology in that there's a lot of computing resources. But when you have something that's valuable and it needs trust and authentication, blockchain is really a strategic variable that can change your business. Human-machine interfaces. What this is machines making machines more human and making it easier for humans to work with machines. So if you look at the new iPhones, which they're looking at your face, that's to do validation. That's an example of human-machine interface. And you're going to find that more and more in the interfaces and in your interactions with computers. Security. You haven't seen anything yet. What's happened out there with viruses? They've been dumb viruses, to be honest with you. You're going to get into bot versus bot battles of, viruses and automated analytical, all the things you see up front about artificial intelligence, blockchain. The bad guys are out there and they're strong. And so security is going to be the next big battle that's out there. And the next frontier of that is analytical forensics, which takes, artificial intelligence and tries to stay one step ahead of security. And finally, I want to finish up with something called quantum computing. If you want to learn some great stuff about quantum computing, go to IBM.com. You can Google it or whatever. But this is going to make a sea change in computing, in what people will do with computing. And so if you think about from a business strategy perspective, you're going to be able to design new medicines at the atomic level, okay? Reducing years of research. So if you're the FDA, how are you going to react to tests done with quantum computing versus, 5 years of trials? If you look at its application into financial operations and modeling for derivatives, you now can do massive amounts of computing, but for a specific business benefit that you were never able to do before. Quantum computing in the next 3 to 5 years, when we have the first available commercial quantum computers out there right now, but 10 years from now, when quantum computing is prevalent, it's going to blow the doors off all the computers today. And when you think about what that means for the R&D for your business, what it means for how you can model things, how you can, conduct analysis of the research data you get in half a day instead of 2 weeks at the end of a quarter, there's going to make a big difference in how your business executes and how it's reflected in the strategy. So that's my presentation for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope this was illuminating.
Thank you, Michael. Really enjoyed your presentation. We have some time now for Q&A. Our first question is from David Pritchard. Are you going to touch on the strategy of implementing AI?
The biggest challenge or the biggest factor you want to face on the strategy of implementing AI is to figure out, do you want to do it yourself or do you want to partner? Who are you going to partner with? What tools and do you have the staff that knows how to use your tools and your partners that you engage with? And also making sure that you have your data is in a standardized form so that you can, whatever you do with AI, if you have I forget what the exact term is. If you don't have good data, your AI will not be great. So are you going to use real-time data? Are you going to stage the data? Are you going to have it normalized, placed in data lakes, data marts and data lakes? There's a lot to think about in AI, but if you have the right data, then people will trust making the decisions, and that's a big problem with with people today. Will they trust the answer that AI gives you? Will you make that move on the chessboard?
Where does big data fit into your 5 technologies?
Big data is underneath all of them. So if you go back to the previous slide.
Let me do that.
Yeah. So data is underneath artificial intelligence. Data is underneath blockchain. Data is what the human and the machine exchange. Security is about securing the data. Quantum computing is about processing the data. So I could call it data, but it's such a basic, foundational element that you have to have in each one of these. Now the challenge is that to do a lot of this, people have really unstructured, poor, old, dirty data that makes a lot of these not be practical and applied. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing, but I didn't call out data here because you need data everywhere.
Thank you, Michael. There's one other question from Subhash. Driving transformation at this scale clearly needs change management. Mm-hmm. How long would it typically take to see the benefits of these recommendations?
Well, some of them are very quick because they're very tactical, and you're basically telling someone stop doing that, and they stop doing it. It's like going to the doctor and tell them my arm hurts. Well, don't move your arm. But when you look into at some of the more substantial programs that are combining systems or that are combining processes or integrating processes, you usually don't see benefits. I mean, if they're a major project, you don't want projects that are longer than, say, 9 to 10 months. But usually you'll start to see benefits after 9 to 10 months. But that begs an even bigger question about value realization. So what I've found is many companies or agencies, they'll do the project, but there's no real focus on did we actually capture the benefits. because it's a hard question to answer, and it requires, if they had poor data to begin with, it requires more data at the end. And that's why so many deals that are put together for value realization deals, hey, I'll take X percent out of your spend, or I'll grow your revenue X. There's a real debate over the baseline. So, you never really want to do a 3-year big project, big bang, because those rarely result in success. You tend to do something that shows incremental benefit over 6 to 9 months. You re-baseline, you take the next step, more of an agile approach. But even when you do that, understanding and really realizing those benefits is something that most people don't do, because it might give them an answer they don't want, or it's too hard. So it's a complicated question.
Thank you, Michael. There is one other question from Dave. How have you seen digital twin technology evolve?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I used to work in the aerospace industry, and now I just do research. My big research thing that I'm going around the world to speak about is how airplanes are going to be built in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Not aluminum, they're going to become thermoplastics, but we won't go there tonight. But the point being is, everybody's talking about digital twin in these aircraft factories. Basically, I guess I'll give you a really simple example. You're building a composite fuselage, and there's an RFID chip inside the panel that has all the quality docs already in there, and it goes to the next stage. Or the digital twin technology is absorbed on this one machine part, and it has plus and minus tolerances. It goes, it follows the part. That's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a lot of experience in that, but I do know that the actual modeling of that will be really affected by quantum computing. So when you think about how Boeing produced the 777 with the modeling, the supercomputers, they'll now be able to go down and test tensils of metal tensils, joining compounds, the engineering of joints, all those types of production materials. Quantum computing is going to radically increase that, because you'll actually be able to test the tensile or the properties of the metal compound, or your ceramic compound, or your fiber compound down to the molecular level. That'll really change that. I mean, drug companies are they're just starting on the edge with the quantum computing to design new drugs using quantum computing down to the not the molecular, but the atom level.
Okay, so from a global perspective, and I always relate things to airplanes. 40% of all the airplanes in the next 20 years are going to be sold to Asia. As an example, Airbus sold 51% of the airplanes last year to Asia. Where do you see this artificial intelligence and blockchain and what you're talking about? Is it going to be Asia, or do you really see U.S. companies adapting it? So I'm really kind of saying, where do you see this going in the next 10 years?
They're already doing it. From a supply chain perspective, let's talk about airplane parts. So you probably want to know that the parts that you're putting in a maintenance, I mean, I know a little bit about planes, but not a lot. Okay, so I'm not you. But you want to know about that the parts that you're using are from an OEM, original manufacturer, right? And so how do you do that? Well, you have chain of custody issues, you have validation issues, someone could get cheaper parts, put them in, and it jeopardizes plane safety. So if you had a way to non-repudiation of the parts for airplanes, I think that would be like a very practical application of this. And if you're going out to some of these areas in the third world where where trust and security of the supply chain of these parts might not be as easy to do, then I think you might see especially in a greenfield perspective, there's not many integrations to do. If it's they're putting new capabilities in, new supply chains. So I think you'd see blockchain being used for the spare parts and the supply chain of aircrafts. And when in that part of the world, when you've been over there, it's a long way. I mean, even going from Singapore to Sydney is 8 hours. It's easy. It's closer to London for us right here than it is from Singapore to Sydney. You know, you have these long, extensive supply chains, and they need authentication and validation.
Do you think the financial component of blockchain will be important for the future of education in the area of finance and accounting, i.e. Bitcoin, etc.?
So the answer is yes, and you're going to have the ability. So right now, IBM closes its books in 7 days in the quarter. We brought that down from like 15 days to 7 days. I imagine we're starting to get, I think we have like 51% of our invoices being done automatically with blockchain right now. So as you look at the increasing use of blockchain for the validation of invoices, Walmart's using it for validation of POs. Blockchain, anytime there's a financial validation of a transaction required, and you can automate that with blockchain and not have someone touch it, it's going to, number one, it's going to remove errors, it's going to make it faster and make it cheaper. So I think within the financial control systems and how you think about the future of that, you know, you're not going to have as many people doing audit and validation as they are doing analysis of the results of the financials or the information you get. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know enough about Bitcoin to make any intelligent comment. I mean, I know something, but I wouldn't want to talk because there's probably a Bitcoin guy out there.
Thank you, Michael. We really enjoyed your presentation tonight, and thank you for taking the time to share your insights with us.